planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
Come on, everybody. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Oh, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Can we clap it out? Here we go. We shall not be moved. We
Shall not be moved, just like a tree by the water. We shall not be moved.
Yes, we stand against oppression. We shall not be moved. We stand against oppression. We shall not. Oh, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Keep it going. Just lower it a little bit. Is everybody in? All right. So here's how this works. Because this is a moral fusion movement, we're all about the diversity, y'all, right? So this does not exactly represent that fusion. So I'm gonna move up just a hair, and I'm gonna invite about 20 people to come and form what we have called the New England Justice Jump-Off Choir. And we call it the Justice Jump-Off Choir because we ready for anything at any time, right? So I'm gonna invite you to come quickly to the front and help us lift this song. And if you look around and you say, I don't see anybody that looks like me, that's because you're not up here. Come on, come on. There you go. If you're not able to stand, send somebody in your place. It does not matter if you cannot hold a note. It's all good. I'm not gonna turn all the way around. Are they back there?
You got somebody over here?
Huh? Oh, we're good, we're good.
Write your name on it.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna lift it. Shall not be moved. Here we go. We're ready. Yeah, we shall not. We shall not be moved. We shall not.
We shall not be moved.
Oh, just like a tree planted by the
water. We shall not be moved.
their harmony. That's all right. We shall not.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the standing by the water.
We shall not be moved. Yeah, yeah.
Come on, come on.
Yeah. Poor People's Campaign. Poor People's Campaign. Poor People's Campaign. Poor People's Campaign. One more time. Poor People's Campaign. All right. All right. Let me see the early risers. Early risers, if you got up before 5 a.m., look around. These are your overachievers. They mess up the curve for everybody else, right? If you got up at around 7:15, you got up at around 9, after 10, if you just woke up in time to roll out here in March, it doesn't even matter, because when you got up, I guarantee you, you had justice and freedom on your mind, right? A little coffee, I get that. But you had justice on your mind. All right, let's lift this one. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I said I woke up this morning with my mind. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. I said I woke up this morning with my mind. It was early, but I got up, y'all. I had my mind. Hallelujah. 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 Yeah, I'm walking and talking with my mind. I said I'm walking and talking with my mind. You know I'm walking and talking with my mind. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm singing and shouting with my mind.
Stayed on freedom.
Oh, I'm singing and shouting with my mind.
Stayed on freedom.
Oh, I'm singing and shouting with my mind.
with my mind.
Stand on freedom. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There ain't no harm to keep your mind.
Stand up.
I tell you, there ain't no harm to keep your mind.
Stand up.
Oh, there ain't no harm to keep your mind.
Set on freedom.
Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, just keep your feet planted and keep your mind. Stand on freedom. Oh, just stand and plant and keep your mind. Stand on freedom. Oh, just stand and plant and keep your mind. Stand on freedom. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah,
Okay,
hallelujah.
come on, I want everybody right here. Yeah, I woke up this morning with my mind. It was early, but I got up and I had my mind. Well, I woke up this morning, I had my mind. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Come on, now this is the last round. Yeah, I said I woke up this morning and I had my mind. Yeah, I woke up this morning, I had my mind. You know I got up, y'all, and I had my mind. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Come on. I know we got to wrap up. But if you can just stand up and hold on to somebody, because this is what we call collective effervescence. It's that energy that's bubbling over out of you and into somebody else. It's that energy that you brought with us from the march into the building. And let's do this last verse. Look at somebody and declare it that I did wake up this morning and I had my mind stayed on freedom, stayed on justice, stayed on what more we have to do. All right? I said I woke up this morning, I had my mind. Come on, tell somebody. You know I woke up this morning, I had my mind. Yeah, I woke up this morning, I had my mind. Come on, can you lift that hand? Hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah.
Come on, musicians, and play us back to our seat. Yeah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Well, I woke up this morning with my mind. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. Let's give it up for Yara Allen. For my sister, the New Hampshire theomusicologist, give it up. Let's give it up for New Hampshire. Say, we must do more. Mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating for the movement. People who vote. You may be seated tonight, but don't sit down on your energy. Have all of the announcements been made? We want the announcers to come up and do some house announcements. We have people from all over the world that are listening by live stream, and so we're gonna wave at them. Come on. Would you all welcome? Would you give a hand clap for all the organizers and all the marshals that are keeping us safe? And New Hampshire's organizer, Reverend Janelle. Come on.
Hello, New Hampshire, forward together! Forward together! We are so glad that everyone is here this evening. How many of us have cell phones? Amen, amen. Can we please all pull out our cell phones and go to the Poor People's Campaign page? We're live streaming this, so we want to make sure that we share that. Some folks ain't got your phones out. I know we got cell phones, a lot of us. So if we could go to the Poor People's Campaign page, if you aren't following it, make sure you follow it. Make sure you follow your state page in New Hampshire. And we want to share this because we want to build this movement of the poor across our nation. And some of y'all didn't get a chance to sign up. So as you see here, if you're not already involved in the Poor People's Campaign, you can text MORAL to 90975. Again, MORAL to 90975. What's the number? 90975. Amen, amen. All right.
We want you to share that with at least 25 people when you leave here tonight. And we want to know how many people here are registered for the movement and registered to vote. You're in the movement. We need you to multiply like Bebe's kids. All right, we need y'all to multiply. So get you at least 10 or 15 people that you can register for the movement by sending them to this, MOREL, M-O-R-E-L, 90975, but also making sure that they are registered to vote. Registered for the movement and registered to vote. Do we have any reports on who's listening in tonight? Whatever states? Some states early on. Do we know any? Virginia. Texas. Costa Rica. Thank you so much. Colorado. So people, as you see, are joining these live streams, go out to thousands and thousands of people across the country. I want to thank the musicians who drove over from Maine. They understand intersectionality and how we have to help one another. I want to also honor our bishop, an Episcopal bishop who's here and representing my good friend, the Right Reverend Michael Curry, who's a homeboy of mine. Now, as we prepare, we have a lot of energy, we have a lot of shouting. We know that we are planning your symbolic march today. It's preparatory for the day, June 20th, 2020, when thousands and thousands of us poor and impacted people, moral leaders and advocates and wealthy people with a conscience about this stuff come together on the day before the summer solstice to ensure that on that next day there is a light on about what is wrong in this country as it relates to systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism, but also what we can do and where we can go, and that we don't have to stay stuck here, right? Because we believe in the agency of poor and impacted people. We believe in the agency of moral leaders. We believe in the agency of advocates. So we have our energy. But in the midst of that, in the midst of our cheering and our shouting, People have to not make the mistake to think we're happy. We're not happy, we're hopeful. That's a different reality. We're not happy about the circumstances around us. We're not happy about the realities. We are hopeful because people are coming together and they're bringing their joy and their sorrow, their pain and their power. We can't ignore this anymore. We will not be silent anymore. I come from a tradition that believes the joy of the Lord is strength. I come from a tradition that believes that you have great praise and great singing to set up deep prophetic preaching that will cut to the core of what is wrong. And so the first thing we do when we come at these gatherings is make sure that we all are seeing the same thing. Because a lot of people know the numbers, but they don't know the facts. Yes, there are 140 million people that are poor and low wealth, but look around this room and you see the signs. You notice we don't carry arbitrary signs. Every sign is connected to the movement. Every song is connected to the movement. We don't just sing things to be singing it. Everything is connected to shifting the moral narrative, because if we don't shift the narrative, we'll never shift the policies. And then we want you to see the faces, people who are organizing around this country who look like each and every one of us. And they've decided that it's time now for the remnant to stand up and come together. So here is a video. We must be honest about the foundations of the political and economic systems we call America. I love America because of her potential, but I know that America will never even get close to being a more perfect nation until we are honest about the politics of rejection.
I want to tell you about some of the leaders who are building the Poor People's Campaign. Callie Greer from Selma, Alabama, who had to bury her daughter, Venus, because she didn't have health care.
I'm here today to share my daughter's Venus's story. Venus discovered a small lump in her breast and she wasn't insured. Venus had to be approved for every prescription and every piece of medical equipment that she needed. I'm standing here today in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign because no one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am a working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
I'm a second-generation fast food worker, and I've experienced the cycle of poverty firsthand. Growing up, I watched my mother endure long hours of back-breaking labor, doing everything she could to feed me and my sisters. My employer barely pays me enough to pay rent and utilities, let alone with the medical expenses with my mother.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. My only chance of going to college was joining the Army.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
But when I lost my housing, health care, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
Hi, my name is Pamela Roach. I'm from Lowndes County, Alabama. And I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids. And I got raw sewage. I don't have no money on power. And I have to travel back and forth to Birmingham to take my daughter with the CPAP machine. Don't have a car and don't have no way to take her.
This is the largest encampment in Aberdeen. There's about 1,000 people in a town of 16,000 who are homeless.
In my community, we were all shut off for the day because none of us could afford our water bills. In the past, my family wasn't able to afford electricity in the winter. It was very hard on all of us.
This wall, this is sin of the highest order.
when there are 38 million poor children, when 60% of African Americans are poor, when 65% of Latinx are poor, when 40% of Asians are poor, when there are 67 million poor white people, we must say, this is not right.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
We lift our voices for justice. We put our bodies on the line for mercy. And together we will proclaim liberty throughout the land for the enslaved, for the poor, and for us all.
All of that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock in the middle, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. A wave, and the historians tell us it's never happened before.
Our communities, Muslim communities, who have joined the Poor People's Campaign, you can count on us.
Our democracy is in trouble.
Our democracy is in trouble.
And we come to demand.
And we come to demand.
Second warning.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard. No one is listening. We write letters, we make calls. No one is listening. So we gotta find a way to make ourselves heard.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court in this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society.
Everybody say, "Ah!"
I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighter, and he taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
We demand the right to vote. We're formally
You need to cease and desist immediately or you'll be arrested.
There will be a movement that will break through the con and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want?
As you can see, all of America, people from everywhere, 43 states now, all over this country, 120 partners, 15 denominational religious groups, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, people of faith, people not of faith, coming together in this particular moment to speak to these interlocking injustices. I want you for a moment to think about, what can I do? We need you now, New Hampshire. I'm serious. I know you say, well, he says that everywhere, but there's a particular reason we need you. Because too long this nation has made poverty, they made it like it's some marginal issue just among black and brown people. And we need you. We need you to show. Did you see that one clip in there when Amy Jo reached over and touched Pamela from Alabama? That's what's going to change America. When we all join together and understand the power we have together. And so I hope you think about that as we go through tonight. all of you online, make sure if you see where a tour is coming in your area, come. We need a bus from every city, every county. Think about that. If we just had one bus from every city, not two, one bus from every church, one bus from every church in one denomination. Just one bus. If we do that all over the country, what that can do on June 20th, 2020, before the conventions, right after the primaries. And we need you to make sure, because folk love to come to New Hampshire early. Well, we don't need them to come here and they not know there's a Poor People's Campaign national call for a moral revival here. And we need you to organize and bring more poor and impact to people, because this movement is not for the poor, but with. Say not for, but with. That's why our coordinating committees have to have clergy, poor impacted person, and an advocate. It is time out for people speaking on behalf of people. It is time for us to build stages where people can speak on behalf of themselves. Now, as we prepare to go into tonight, we are live streaming, so this is almost like TV. We have a time limit. We want to make sure that everybody knows when this young man, Adam, puts his wrap up, it means wrap up, because everybody knows that time. It's not that we don't believe you have more to say, but it's because we're trying to get everybody in. We don't want to lose anybody. We had almost 11,000, 12,000 people online last night. We don't want to lose anybody. We want them to keep sharing. It's probably up to 25,000 today across the nation. When you see the wrap up sign, our musician will begin to play. That's a nice sign. They always put me at the end, so I get whatever's left. They don't even try to get me to me. They just say, you do the end. And so I'll be there at the end. But we are so thankful. Touch your neighbor and say, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together. Can I ask all the clergy to stand up, of whatever faith tradition you are? Can I ask you, let's give all the clergy a hand that are going to do more than just stay in their pulpits. Right. So we're going to do 3 greetings. Are there Jewish people that are here? For all the Jewish people, would we say shalom? Shalom. For all the Christian people here, would we say grace be unto you? For all our Muslim brothers and sisters, would we say assalamu alaikum? And for people that we may not know how to say it in their religious tradition, or they may not have a faith tradition, since y'all are up north, I want to bring South up north. Turn to them and say, hey y'all. That's how we do it down south. That gets everybody. Now we want our host clergy to bring our welcome and building instruction and why she's a part of the Poor People's Campaign and mobilizing towards the moral march, mass moral assembly. Let me say that it's a mass poor people assembly and moral march on Washington. Not just a march, it's a poor people's assembly. I want to invite the pastor of this church now for 9 years, Miss Maggie, Pastor Maggie Lewis, and then after she comes, right after she comes, I want you all to welcome, as I said last night, one of the most powerful sisters and committed to this work. She's not only a New Testament scholar, focuses on economics and theology, but she's a mother. She's a woman that will stay in the trenches where you don't ever have to worry where Liz Theo Harris is. If she's with you all the way. She's been through the battles. She's fought with the homeless and among the homeless. She stood tall, as I said last night, in the UN and the Supreme Court in the Vatican, but she's not lost a common touch. So after the pastor comes and greets us, I want you to give a rousing welcome to the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. Come on, Pastor Maggie.
On behalf of First Baptist Church of Nashua and all its members, I want to welcome you to our faith community home. We are so glad you're here. I want to point out the exits. I feel like a flight attendant, but over here and over here get you out, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 exits out that way. We don't expect to need them, but want you to know they're there. There are gender-neutral bathrooms down that hallway, and other bathrooms this way. We are so glad you're here. You know, 36 years ago, there were some visionary leaders in New Hampshire who wanted to honor the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And they were looking for a church that would host that event. That was 36 years ago. And from what I understand, nobody would do it. But First Baptist of Nashua said, yes, we'll do it. And every year since then, we have hosted on the Saturday before MLK Day at 6 p.m. an event, and we invite you to be there this year, January 18th at 6 p.m. We would welcome you here. But when we were asked to host this event for the Poor People's Campaign, there was no doubt in our minds that we were called to host this event. "50 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King and many others called for a revolution of values in America, calling people to stand together against the evil of militarism, racism, and economic injustice, and to insist that people not die in one of the richest countries in the world because they're poor."
That's right.
We are proud to be a part of this movement. I watch a lot of news on TV, and it's depressing. But I will keep in my heart this week, when I'm watching that news, all of you and what you're doing, what you are called to do, and how you are standing up and not being silent any longer. Welcome and bless you.
Good evening, New Hampshire. Poor People's Campaign. A national call for moral revival. You could do better than that. Poor People's Campaign. A national call for moral revival. Poor People's Campaign. A national call for moral revival. We have a saying in the Poor People's Campaign that when we lift from the bottom, everyone rises. Will you say that with me? When we lift from the bottom, everyone rises. One more time. When we lift from the bottom, everyone rises. And this evening, we're gathered together to lift up, to rise up, to demonstrate the power of the poor and impacted people banding together and changing this country for the better. We're gathered to rise up, to call for a radical redistribution of political and economic power. As the pastor was saying, a revolution of moral values. To show that we must do more. More mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating. All right, you gotta say that. Mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating. Mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating. Mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating. We must do more. We must register and mobilize and organize and educate people for a movement that votes. And we're here to rise up in 2020 at the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, June 20th, 2020. Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, June 20,
2020. Just say that every morning when you wake up. Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, June 20, 2020. Today, in the United States, there are 140 poor and low income, 140 million poor and low income people. That includes 39 million children. As we learned this morning, 64% of disabled people. Even though the God I serve announced that he was sent to bring good news to the poor, release to the captive. Here in New Hampshire, there are 122,000 poor children. 46% of kids in your state are poor. Even though the Jesus I follow proclaimed that he had come so all may have life and have it abundantly. This afternoon, I was talking to a leader who's here this evening about her town that's so small, has such a little tax base, is so poor that they can't afford a post office. Where the kids that go to the school for kindergarten through 8th grade have a total of 5 teachers. This is in a state that has spent about $3 million just over the past 5 years giving corporate subsidies, but can't find money for more teachers, for better schools. And even though the God I honor reminds us that how we treat the poor, how we care for and educate our children, how we treat our neighbor is how we treat God. So we indeed need to rise up. And people, like everybody here in this sanctuary, are indeed rising up, building a moral fusion movement of people of all races and creeds and colors, religions and ages and genders and sexualities, people who are organizing and mobilizing and registering and educating. In 2018, we organized the largest and most expansive wave of nonviolent civil disobedience in more than 40 state capitals and in Washington, D.C. that has ever happened in this country's history. In 2019, we pulled off the Poor People's Moral Action Congress, held the largest forum with presidential candidates in this election season. We presented our Poor People's Moral Budget to the House Budget Committee. We showed our Congress people that we found the money. We have the resources to address systemic racism and poverty and ecological devastation and this messed up war economy and the distorted moral narrative, a narrative that blames the poor for our poverty, pits us against each other, and feeds us the lie of scarcity when we have beautiful abundance all around. And now we're touring this nation. This evening, we're here in New Hampshire, and we're mobilizing and organizing and registering and educating people for a movement that votes. We're rising up to fight poverty, not the poor. Fight poverty, not the poor. Fight poverty, not the poor. We're lifting from the bottom, and everyone is rising. The night before Dr. King was assassinated, he preached about rising up. He said, something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up. And wherever they are assembled today, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. We are still crying out those words today. We want to be free from systemic racism. We want to be free from poverty. We want to be free from the destruction of the earth. We want to be free from militarism. We want to be free from the lies of religious nationalism. Because since 2010, at least 23 states have passed racist voter suppression laws. So we must rise up for voting rights, for the immediate full restoration and expansion of the Voting Rights Act. We demand an end to racist gerrymandering and redistricting. We demand an end to placing persons on the federal bench who have a record of standing against voting rights and LGBTQ rights and women's rights and human rights. We demand automatic voting registration at the age of 18, early voting in every state, same-day registration, the right to vote for the currently and formerly incarcerated, and we demand this now. Not tomorrow, not in a couple of years, now. And as we rise up for voting rights, we must rise up for workers' rights, for welfare rights, for the poor people's rights. Because even though corporations have unmatched profits, there are 62 million people who are working jobs that pay less than a living wage. There are 3 individuals in this country that own as much wealth as half of the US population. There isn't a town or a city anywhere in this state, anywhere in this country, where if you're working full time and making minimum wage, that you can afford a simple 2-bedroom apartment. So we must rise up. Rise up for living wages. Demand the right to a job at a living wage. The right for all workers to form unions, join unions. We demand equal pay for equal work. We demand a guaranteed annual income. We demand fully funded anti-poverty programs that protect the welfare, yes, the welfare of all. We demand housing programs that ensure that all people have a place to call home. We demand an end to evictions. And we know that we can't separate living wages and anti-poverty programs from the health and well-being of our nation and our earth. Because there are 30 million people who don't have health care. Over a dozen states that haven't expanded Medicaid. And even those who have health care can't afford their medical bills. There are 15 million families who can't afford water, and 4 million families who can get unleaded paint and unleaded gas, but can't get unleaded water. Schools in the United States are resegregating, and college students owe more than $1.34 trillion in debt. So we're rising up for health care. We're rising up for education. We're rising up for clean water and clean air. We demand single-payer, universal health care. We demand a fully funded public water and sanitation infrastructure that keeps these utilities and services under public control. We demand 100% clean, renewable energy, a public jobs program to transition to a green economy. We demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of our country's urgent needs. for decent and affordable housing, for free public education, a robust social safety net, and social security. We know that our society and earth can't be healthy or secure, though, until we welcome our immigrant neighbors. There are 10 times as many deportations happening today as decades ago. And federal spending on immigration and border enforcement has increased tenfold over the past couple of decades. So we demand an immigration system that, instead of criminalizing people for trying to raise their families, prioritizes family reunification. We demand an end to federal programs that send military equipment and personnel into local and state communities. We demand the call to build a wall at the US-Mexico border be ceased. We demand an end to detention and deportation. And finally, we know that we cannot take on racism, poverty, ecological devastation without confronting militarism. The United States could cut our military budget in half and still spend more than 140 nations combined. So we have to rise up for peace. We demand an end to military aggression and warmongering. We demand a strong Veterans Administration system that remains public. We demand a ban on assault rifles, a ban on easy access to firearms. So we know what we have to do, what the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is already doing. We must rise up. We must rise up for the 20 veterans who committed suicide today. We must rise up for the 250,000 women who are poor or low income here in New Hampshire. We must rise up for the thousands of homeless people in this state. We must rise up, rise up, rise up. Rise up. I want to stop with a quote from Frederick Douglass that he preached about power and rising up. As he was fighting the slave powers, he said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never will, it never did." He said, "It's not light that we need, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, the earthquake." Well, New Hampshire, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is that fire. We are that storm. We are indeed a whirlwind. We are quaking this earth, and the people are rising right out of the ground. So rise up, 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 rise up.
Rise up. I want you to look around now and look real carefully around this room and hear Liz's call and ask who needs to be added to this fire. Just look around. Who needs to be added to the storm? Who needs to be added to the earthquake so that when we march, it is felt? Who needs to be a part of a Poor People's Assembly? Who needs to help us shake the foundations of this nation? Look around some more, because this is not just a gathering tonight for us to feel good. It is a gathering for us to organize. How many of you are formerly members of the Poor People's Campaign in New Hampshire? in New Hampshire, all right? I'm seeing some good. So tonight you can sign up. You can sign up. We're not an organization, we're an organism. We don't need any more organizations. We got enough organizations. We need a movement. We need the organization to figure out how to come together. Don't get it twisted. Liz and I are not saying everybody ought to come under our leadership, but we're saying we, in this moment, need to find ways to come together and build a movement and set aside some of our organizational egos and recognize that the same people are fighting the same people. The same people that fight public education fight against the LGBTQ community. And the same people that fight the LGBT community fight living wages. And the same people that fight living wages fight health care. And the same people that fight health care fight against monies and guaranteed income for the poor. And the same people that do that fight against voting rights. So if they are cynical enough to be together, we ought to be smart enough to come together. That's the point. That's the point. All right. Okay. So we need to look around. We need you to join. We need you to join. It's not a whole lot of meetings or anything. We are a movement, not an organization, a movement. In the days, they didn't have an abolitionist organization. They did have them, but it was called the abolition movement. And sometimes you have to have movements that can help make the work of our organizations better because we all come together. Will we rise up as Liz has called us to? Yes. And did you hear us say we have a clear agenda? We're not just out here loud and wrong. That's the worst thing you can do is be loud and wrong. And the second worst thing you can do is just curse the darkness but never have any light, never have anything. And so at this time, we want to have remarks from our state leaders who are here about why we are in the city, and they're going to introduce the testifiers. Each of them have 3.5 minutes. And again, we're saying even to our coordinating committees, welcome people in, welcome people in. Every state, our hope by January is for every state to have 30,000 people they can connect with online. 43 states times 30,000, that's over 1.2 million. 30,000 people, some way we can connect social media and otherwise that we can make sure they know about this campaign. Can y'all help us do that? Help us do that? Help us do that? Help us? So I'm gonna take, since I'm a little bishop, that's a big bishop over there, but in the congregational church, I'm a bishop as well. So I don't see you down here, Bishop. So I want to ask you to come and just some remarks just from the Episcopal Church of why you're here as a bishop and the churches that you are with. And then I want to ask Deborah O'Perry. Is that O'Perry? I can't half read. I'll get it together after a while. Papanala. Did I say that right? Okay, help me say it right. Opera, oh, like opera. Okay, I got it now. Opera Mala. And then the Reverend Eric Jackson. They will come right after the bishop. Will we allow the bishop just a minute or so to come?
I was not expecting this. Thank you. God bless this movement. God bless this movement. You know, I am an introvert. So this is like this is what hell is for me right now at this moment. And yet this is, we're all being asked in this moment in our nation's history to stand up. To find and summon that courage. For some of us, it was enough. It's so hard just to gather with all of us and to march down a strange street and to chant those chants. For some of that is summoning up a lot. Imagining those who aren't here, who are afraid. Our nation is afraid. Our nation is afraid. And the one refrain that I see in the Old Testament and the New Testament and so many sacred texts is do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Fear not. Fear not, says the angel to Mary, a poor woman, a teenager who's asked to bear God himself in my tradition and to turn it all over, to turn the world upside down. I want to just share one thing. I have 1 minute. For this movement requires courage. But what might require even more courage for each of us is to go to our neighbor, the neighbor who's got a lawn sign of a candidate that we might find absolutely deplorable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And to step across that boundary line and to say, peace. I need to know who you are. You have become a stranger to me, and I am a stranger to you, and this will not do. This is not how we build the divine realm. So let that be a moment of summoning tremendous courage. Don't go alone. I've gone alone. It is terrifying as this is. Even more so. But that's what we're called to do. And that's where we educate and re-knit together what has been so sorely torn apart. I am so honored to be here with you both. Thank you. So honored and humbled. Lead on. Let us rise up and knit it together again. Thank you.
Shalom. The words of my faith tradition. Some of you know me as Dr. O. But for the rest of you, my name is Debbie Apramala. I'm one of the chairs of the New Hampshire Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Tonight, I'm going to share my family's journey to the shadows. Never heard of the shadows?
Wow.
My family lives in the shadows. Our third child was born 7 weeks early. The only thing my family knew was a beautiful addition to our family. Adriel is deaf-blind and developmentally disabled. As he begun to have medical hurdles to overcome, we flew into action. My husband and I are dedicated parents. We would provide and support our children so they could thrive. Adriel would be no different. While financially stable, we had to reach out for help. I'll never forget the day a social worker told us, yet again, we made too much money to qualify for any assistance from social programs. Then they leaned in real close and quiet. If the two of you divorce and your wife quits her job, you can get assistance. We don't care if you live together. Two things happened that day. We're still married. And on that day, we were firmly launched into the shadows. In the shadows are hundreds and thousands of marginalized people and families. In this country, we have 140 million poor and low-income people. 36% of the people in New Hampshire are poor or low income. Of the 36%, 12 to 15% experience a disability. If you are stunned or amazed about that number. You should be. Many don't know because our facts are kept in the shadows. In New Hampshire, we boast of a low unemployment rate. But the government, the social media, reporters, everybody can't be bothered to report the community, the disabilities community unemployment rate. In 2016, it was reported the unemployment rate for those who experience a disability is 64.1% in this country. And New Hampshire's numbers are similar to that. The workforce that many families like mine use to support their family members, like my son, it is disappearing. Once again, my family and I have lost a direct service person over wages. She had not had a raise in 3 years. She asked correctly 3 times for a raise. All she wanted was a quarter an hour. A quarter. Okay? Even with the quarter, she would be making a little over $13 an hour. Right? 13 for a quarter? This workforce not only supports my son in the community, it also allows me to do the essential work that I do that supports my family and the community. The solution is so simple. Pay a living wage. Enact legislation that will raise the minimum wage to $15. Not over years. We already know $15 an hour is not enough to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in New Hampshire. Very often people who are marginalized are erased from the process of organizing and speaking to our experience because we are seen as incapable or don't fit the model of what a diverse ability should be. Disability communities, stop making programs that don't include everybody. Stop lopping off the top and stop lopping on the bottom and pushing people through the middle. And if you can't do that middle, you are left in shadows. The belief that my son is incapable forces him deep into the shadows. The M.O.R.E. is here to mobilize, organize, register to vote, and educate. I know the disability community can mobilize. It organizes, and I know we vote. Now is the time for us to educate. Our facts must be included and taken out of the shadows. The PPC is here. We are ready to listen and to learn. We must rise up together to form the fist of change, to bring it down on positive change. We are here to shine the lights in the shadows so nobody goes into the shadows. But we need to be at the table to have our voice heard. We must stand together to shine the bright light in the shadows. Stand with me. Join with me. Stand. Rise. Stand. Rise.
My name is Reverend Eric Jackson, and I serve as one of the tri-chairs for the Poor People's Campaign. And I'm part of the Poor People's Campaign for 2 reasons. One, I am tired. I don't know about you, but I am tired. Tired of being trampled on by the wheels of injustice. You know, serving in the ministry, being denied access to health insurance and health care, and then being told by doctors that, you know what, by the grace and mercy of some doctors out there who said that, you know what, just give me whatever you have. I was able to survive, but not able to even get access to health care, adequate health care, in the name of corporate greed. I am tired.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know about what it is that's making you tired today, but all I know is right now, with these wheels of injustice that's rolling down upon us right now, I'm ready to take the wheel and push it off and rise up. And when we come together as a people, we can rise up and toss that wheel to the side together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The second reason why I'm part of the Poor People's Campaign is because this is a movement not designed for the people, but this is a movement with the people and by the people. And right now we are going to hear some stories from some folks who are vulnerable and courageous enough to come here and stand and tell their story about how they have been impacted by the wheels of injustice.
Yes, sir.
And I want to introduce some of those folks to you tonight. The first one is Fawn Gaudette. Fawn is a descendant of the Blackfeet Nation and is an environmental and indigenous activist. She is committed to encouraging people to peacefully protect its humanity and biodiversity. The next one is Garrett Walker. Garrett studies social studies education at Southern New Hampshire University. Garrett hopes to build upon the foundation left by figures such as Bell Hooks, Dr. King, and Bobby Seale, as we collectively strive towards liberation. Janara Clay. Janara is a licensed massage therapist and has owned and operated her practice for 18 years. She also works as an elder care provider and dog walker. She's a political activist with a passion for using her voice against injustices. And last but not least, Asma El-Huni. Asma is a proud Muslim woman who came to the U.S. as a child. She has organized and been arrested organizing in areas of immigration and Black Lives Matter. She is the recipient of Georgia State's 2016 MLK Humanitarian Award and is currently working as lead organizer for the United Valley Interfaith Project, organizing around immigration and economic injustice. So please help me in welcoming our storytellers for this evening.
Before she starts, one of the things we do across the nation is sometimes when people have told their stories of pain in order to point to what we've done, we were doing it somewhere and the guy said, "Don't clap at my pain, join me." And so what we do is at the end of each story, we say this: somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on. Far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
Okay, hello, my name is Fawn Gaudette, and I am a proud descendant of the Blackfeet Nation. Because of my upbringing, I, like many of you, am keenly aware of the sacred circle of life, and I just wanted to thank you all for all that you're doing. The circle is in decline, and it affects our planet, our ecosystem, our food system, biodiversity, humanity, and all species of Mother Earth. We live in a dangerous time of change, and it's time for all of us to join together to save our one planet. Right now, we are in the 6th mass extinction. It sounds overwhelming, but it's the truth. David Festa shared in his Defense Fund article, human beings are causing 1 million species to go extinct. The New York Times reported that we are having an insect apocalypse. We need to correct this. It's been estimated with climate change that we have 10 to 12 years to correct this. Some people say it's less than that. Matt McGrath, an environmental correspondent, shares climate change, 12 years to save the planet, make that 18 months. He feels we have 18 months to take corrective actions to make change. Please take a moment to digest this. We hear a lot about climate change, but we don't hear it tied into the 6th mass extinction. Recently, we just heard on NPR and throughout the world, in the news, that we have lost up to 3 billion bird species since 1970. That is devastating. In New Hampshire, we have been working on trying to correct things. We have been working on a bill to help stop the insect apocalypse, specifically bees and native pollinators. We have been working on the Saving New Hampshire's Pollinators Act, and it was a bill that was retained unanimously in the House with 20-0. And we are working on it, and we hope it moves forward, but we're going to need your help. We need to take vital steps to protect our biodiversity and our environment. We must peacefully raise awareness and take positive action to preserve and protect all species in the United States and globally. We have to join together as humanity together for the whole earth. We cannot stop. Even if we are afraid, we have to take action and rise. People are not putting together that it's climate change and the sixth mass extinction. This is happening not because of an asteroid hitting the Earth. It's happening because of us. It's our action. I want to share something from the moral budget. Climate change is causing untold human suffering. In 2010, 400 deaths worldwide could already be attributed to climate change. By 2030, that number is projected to reach 700,000. Fossil fuels, chemicals, and other high-polluting industries were responsible for 9 million premature deaths worldwide in 2015, caused by poisoned air, water, and land. Inaction on climate change could cost up to 15.7% of the GDP per year and wipe out $3.3 trillion from the US economy. That is as much as 5 great recessions, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. But we could turn this around. Though if we invest in our planet and the generations ahead, addressing climate change with a $200 billion per year investment in clean energy transition would reduce the damage to the GDP and create 2.7 million new jobs. These jobs could create building accessible water, clean water, sanitation, and other green infrastructure all over the country, especially in poor, rural, indigenous, and other communities that have been neglected. I feel we have a powerful opportunity as leaders to save ourselves and the world. In New Hampshire, thousands of climate activists, many the Red Rebel Brigade, an extension of Extinction Rebellion, took to the streets in a global climate strike where a total of millions joined together following Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old climate leader right here. And her powerful quote is, "I am here to say our house is on fire, and I want you to act as if you were in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire." Take a moment, think about that. It is up to us to create the positive change, to rise, to stop this, and we have the power to do this. In New Hampshire, activists such as New Hampshire Sierra Club, 350, New Hampshire Youth Movement, Citizens Climate Lobby have been working together to effect creative change. Recently, 350 and a bunch of groups went to the Bow sorry, I'm gonna stop. Okay, well, thank you very much. Keep rising.
Hello, my name is Garrett Walker. I'm going to talk about voting today. So it is neither an accident nor an oversight that the poorest and most vulnerable people are deliberately denied voting rights. Working class people tend to favor more progressive political and economic policies. We've seen here in New Hampshire attempts at increasing the documentation necessary and therefore cost related to voting. Meanwhile, at the federal level, we see the 2013 gutting of the Voting Rights Act which shows that those in power have little interest in ensuring fair elections. This backward system excludes the vast majority of our society in the interest of maintaining the rule of a rich minority over the masses. This is seen in their electors in the National Electoral College, which actually decide the outcome of presidential elections, not us, the individual voters. Even physical access to a voting booth is a political matter. Many people cannot afford the time or effort to travel to a polling place as a result of either long working hours or a disability. These people must go to greater expense to exercise their right of suffrage. Additionally, racist prosecution and sentencing policies in the United States result in African American and Latino people suffering greater rates of incarceration and thereby vote disenfranchisement as compared to white people. Additionally, billions of people have no vote enfranchisement because they live outside the United States, and yet their lives are still impacted by its militarism and its imperialism. The American government and its corporations meddle in the lives of oppressed people all around the world. Both capitalist parties are complicit in this empire building, and therefore we, the working people of the world, must organize for our own interests. The right to vote is an inalienable right and must be extended to every single person. However, each of us lives the failures of the bourgeois electoral process every day. I urge everyone to remember that important action can be taken even outside the ballot box. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Janera. It's an honor to be here. I want to share with you what a single-payer healthcare system would mean to millions of our brothers and sisters. Single-payer would guarantee healthcare as a human right. Currently, 44 million Americans are uninsured and another 38 million have inadequate healthcare insurance, or what we call the underinsured. I am one of those 38 million. With a plan that costs $7,000 per year, a deductible of $5,000, and an outrageous amount of co-pays, I sometimes can't afford the medications that I need. 1 in 5 Americans can't afford to fill necessary prescriptions. I've been forced to put off necessary health care because sometimes I know I can't afford to pay the bill. Thank you. Several months ago, I was awakened at 3 a.m. by a sudden asthma attack. I rushed to get my nebulizer, but after 3 treatments, it wasn't working. I decided to try another one, and the panic began sinking in. And all I could think about was the last attack that landed me in the emergency room and left me with a $1,600 bill. I resorted to at-home remedies, and within 2 hours, my symptoms finally started to subside. A trip to the clinic followed. After a battery of breathing treatments, I was sent home with 5 new prescriptions. Upon filling them, the cost was so incredible, I could only afford to fill 4. The inhaler I so desperately needed was $268. In my shock and disbelief, the pharmacist confided in me that he sees this all the time. I left the pharmacy with no inhaler. The next day I returned with the money after deciding to not pay a bill. The pharmacy technician ringing my order actually apologized as she told me the total cost. After some discussion, she too confided in me that she sees this all the time, but mostly with insulin. We exchanged looks of horror and deep sadness. What I'm describing to you is far too common in America because of the greed and corruption of those in power of our for-profit health insurance and pharmaceutical companies. Americans are forced to put off necessary procedures and medications simply because they cannot afford them. Just one military contract to Boeing would cost $25 billion. That's about as much as it would cost to expand the Affordable Care Act and provide health insurance to millions in 14 states. I could share a dozen more atrocious stories. People in America are in deep despair, and when we take the time to listen, we understand their pain. It is time for a moral revolution in this country. In a land of plenty, I see far too many of my neighbors being left behind. It's time to guarantee health care as a human right. That's why I'm part of the PPC, and I'm going to the 2020 March on Washington. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be on the stage with so many amazing people. Reverend Barber, I don't know if you remember me, but 4 years ago in Georgia, I was at a church at the Poor People's Campaign, and here we are again. So my name is Asma El-Huni, and I am a proud Muslim immigrant. Thank you. From Africa. I'm here today to make sure I lend my voice, my message, and to speak loud and clear about my opposition against the continued militarization of foreign intervention, our borders, federal agencies, and our police. Our country for far too long has relied on the security apparatus to face issues in our society. It is imperative we understand that we can't and we will not get rid of our problems by bombing them away, by shipping them away, by throwing them behind bars. While we talk about not being perfect, but moving to better places, I'd like to propose that what is in fact happening is that we are moving backwards and doing so rapidly. We are in a state of crisis. According to the Department of Defense, for the fiscal year 2017, we spent $606 billion on the Department of Defense. 2019, we spent $685 billion. And for the year 2020, they're proposing $718 billion. To put this in perspective, for the year 2020, the Department of Education is only getting 9.9% of that amount. Let me say that in another way. That's 1,122% more than the Department of Education. This is our money, folks. The United States spends more on the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, than the 9 countries combined that come after it. We are moving backwards, I tell you. As we continue these racist policies under the security apparatus abroad, we are doing the same similar thing here in this country by banning people like my family from ever being able to come and see me. I wouldn't stand here before you if I tried to apply to come to this country now. We are moving backwards, I tell you. Just as I am separated from my family, millions of other people in this country, in this nation, live in fear of being separated from theirs. Through private prisons and government prisons as well, they profit off of these detentions and deportations of hundreds of thousands of our community members every year. We are moving backwards, I tell you. When Angela Davis and others spoke about prison abolition, at that time, it looked possible. There weren't as many people in jail. Then in 1971, the very racist war on drugs was implemented, and the amount of people incarcerated skyrocketed. And then came the sentencing reform, which we all know targets and continues to target mostly brown and black bodies. We are moving backwards, I tell you. The thing is, when people ask why I organize, I say I don't have a choice. This is not a choice for me. I need you to know it's not a choice for you too. It may seem like that they are only coming for us, but I'm telling you, they're coming for you too, if they haven't come for you already. We need to work together. You need me as much as I need you. We need to work together. We need freedom for brown and black bodies. We need freedom for those who struggle with poverty. We need freedom for those abroad, including in Palestine, including in Africa and Asia. And we need freedom for those right here. We may be moving backwards, but I want you to know that for every step back, it's winding us up with more energy. And it's gonna propel us forward. I want you to think of those machines where we wind them up. What happens when we let them go, right? Our moving backwards is giving us the energy and strength to move forward. We are coming, and we're headed to DC on June 20th, 2020, March on Washington. Thank you.
Come on, let's say it. Somebody's hurting our people. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Let's give up another big round of applause for all of the testifiers. And we promise you that on June 20th, 2020, America will hear from voices like this. This stage will be different. It will not be people speaking on behalf of people. It will be people who look like us from every race, creed, color, and sexuality, standing arm in arm and declaring to this nation both the problem, but also demanding that we move into transformation. And we will do it together. There is an ancient text, New Testament text, Pastor, and it was written in a time when there was this lineage of oppression perpetrated by a certain group of folk. Some people thought it was just one of them. But as you look at ancient history, you find out that the one represented a legacy of oppression. You know, it's important now in this season in America that we don't just blame it all on one person, who may have just gotten elected a couple of years ago, because that analysis is not deep enough. It is missing the fact that that one person benefited from an entire way of thinking and an audience that had been built up for the last 50 years, at least the last 50. And in some ways traces all the way back to the redemption movement that tried to overturn and did Reconstruction in the 19th century, and the slaveholder mentality. In the Bible, this legacy was not called Trump, it was called Caesar. And Caesar was not merely a person, but a title. And those who held the title Caesar always did the same thing. They oppressed the poor. They hurt the marginalized. They cared only for the 1%. When Caesars looked out at society and all of the people that supported Caesars, they called the poor and the working poor and anybody underneath the 1% the humidors. And they called everybody else the honored ones. The Caesars even had their own artists, their own musicians, their own poets like Cicero, who called the poor and the working poor the dregs of the city. The Caesars, they went from the bottom up. They trained governors and state legislators. At that time, people in the different councils called the decurions. And if you had enough money, you could be a senator. But you had to make sure that if you worked for Caesar, you cared only about the top and you dismissed the bottom. That is why Rome imploded from within. Not from without, but from within. This Caesar mentality that was very nationalistic, had its own religion, the worship of Caesar, cared only about Rome, cared only about, in our time, America, built up its military, invested more in military than it did in infrastructure and education. This Caesar mentality would crucify you if you cared about the poor. Even if you were nonviolent and stood against Caesar, the Caesar mentality could not stand nonviolent movements. Had nothing to do with love. Caesar mentality disregarded women, disregarded children, only cared about the highest. That Caesar mentality took this brown-skinned Palestinian Jew and crucified him on a cross as a revolutionary, and did it openly as a sign, you don't mess with Caesar. You don't mess with Caesar's folk. But they didn't expect that a whole movement would rise up. And by the time you get to the New Testament book in Hebrews, the people that followed this revolutionary, this movement leader, they were getting a little tired. Caesar had gone crazy. Caesar was lying all the time. You know, the Caesar that was on the throne at this time was Caesar to the 10th degree. There had been other Caesars, but this Caesar would start wars just to distract from his own failures. This Caesar. This Caesar had his own media. This Caesar. Yeah. This Caesar tried to make it illegal for protest. And the folk were getting tired, and some of them were thinking about turning around. And the Apostle Paul, we think, wrote to them and said, listen, you better make sure you know who you are. And he said in the 10th chapter, the 39th verse of Hebrews, he said, we. Now notice he didn't say I. He didn't talk about individual, because we need to understand that no issue that we try to change can it be done alone. I often tell my friends, for instance, that care about the climate. My son is a climate lawyer. He does the environmental law, and he works for Climate Reality. And when he went to work for Climate Reality, he said even to Al Gore, if we're not going to focus on systemic racism and voter suppression, we're never going to solve the issue of the attacks on our climate. So you can't separate the fight for the climate apart from the fight against racism, particularly systemic racism, because the same people that get elected through racist voter suppression, once they get elected, they use their power to support the corporations over the climate. So Paul understood this years ago, and Paul said, we are not of those who shrink, but we are those who rise up. We are those who refuse to quit. And we are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Paul said when Caesar is doing his worst or her worst, you need to know who you are. It's one thing to know what your adversary is doing, but you need to know who you are. Because knowing who you are is critical to your sanity and your ability to sustain a fight back when you are facing what Paul Tillich called the very threat of non-being and non-existence. Martin Luther King once diagnosed America as having a neurotic sickness and a septic commitment to racism, poverty, and militarism that was destroying its soul and ripping its moral principles apart. And then he said, and the only way to free this nation and address this matter is to raise with others a campaign of poor people and moral leaders who have nothing to lose but know who they are, that they are the only ones that might have the moral and spiritual capacity to turn the nation's conscience and character toward the way of love, truth, justice, and nonviolence. We are in a curious time. Liz has said it on occasion. We are at a time when for the first time we can really see where we have all the resources, the technology, and everything to address every problem we're talking about. But we're also at a time that the question is, can America be? Can America in this movement, in this moment, grasp this moment of third reconstruction, if you will? Or will America keep taking mighty steps backwards? And in this moment, poor people, impacted people, moral leaders, and advocates like you might just be the only hope for America to be. That's why we're on this M.O.R.E tour. That's why we started in El Paso, Texas, at the invitation of people who had just experienced gruesome and graphic death, violent death at the hands of white nationalism. But it was our Latino brothers and sisters that said, come to El Paso, number one, because we cannot afford for this nation to only talk about white nationalism when somebody shoots somebody or calls people ugly names, and we don't realize that it is the words and the policies that lead to the violence. That's why we're going to end in Memphis and the Mississippi Delta. That's why we're saying we must do more. Yes, we know what other folk are doing, but we must do more. We are not of those who shrink back under destruction. We must do more mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating. We're doing this 25-state tour. It's going to take a lot. Pray for us. Pray. 25 states in 9 months, trying to inspire. We can't do the work. We believe in a bottom-up movement. But on this tour, we're trying to mobilize poor people and their allies. We're asking folk to organize M.O.R.E Fusion Coalition, where people come together who may be working in different silos, but they understand when there's a need to be a fusion coalition. We get that word fusion from the 19th century when black, poor former slaves and free black people found their way together with white people and poor whites who had been used by the white Southern aristocracy to fight a war. And when they figured it out, those black and white people came together and formed fusion coalitions, changed this nation. We're trying to register people for a movement and vote, not just to vote. People are sick and tired of us coming around them when it's voting time, then don't talk to them anytime else. And we're trying to educate people and politicize them, help them understand what's going on. That's why this movement is deeply empirical and emotional. Our emotionalism is deeply intellectual. It's because we got the facts. First thing we did was we had the souls of poor folk, and we looked at all 5 of these areas: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, false moral narrative of religious nationalism. And when we looked at poverty, we've had to first recognize that we had it wrong in America. Most of the time people are talking about 39 million poor folk and 140 million poor and low wealth people, nearly 50% of this country. We had to get that fact and footnote it twice and 3 times because people didn't believe it. Because if you're talking about the wrong numbers, you don't even understand the extent of the problem. Therefore, the solution will never be sufficient. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a M.O.R.E revival. That's why we're calling for a mass poor people's assembly. Everybody will make up the assembly, but we want impacted people to come and all of us to join with them. An assembly, not merely in a march, an assembly. Right after the primaries, when we know who's running on both sides of the aisle, but right before the conventions. And we're saying to the conventions, you really don't have to tell us who to vote for. Let us start hearing our issues and we'll know who to vote for. One of the great problems is that we have this anemic and weak way of doing politics, left versus right. Are you on the left? Are you on the right? Are you a conservative? Are you a liberal? First of all, left and right doesn't even come from this century. It comes from the 17th century in the French Revolution. Those on the left didn't like the monarchy. Those on the right did. We're not in those times. I got a left hand and a right hand. I'm conservative and I'm liberal. I'm conservative with hot sauce and liberal with ketchup. Come on, y'all. You know, I'm a conservative Christian. Oh, yeah. I'm a conservative Christian. I want to conserve the essence of what the scripture says about how you treat the poor and the least of these and women and the children. And I want to liberally spread it to everybody. Those people that go around saying the main issues of spirituality is disliking gay people and not allowing women the right to choose and being for prayer in the school and for guns and waving the flags and tax cuts, they are the true liberals because they are liberally leaving out the most important stuff in the Bible. They're saying a whole lot about what God says so little and so little about what God says so much. And half of what they say, God didn't even say it. So we want people to come together because we are not of those who are shrinking back unto destruction. But the time has come for us to stand up. We can't shrink now. Hunt your neighbor and say, you can't shrink now. No, your grandchildren's children are depending on you. And some of you say, well, Reverend Barbara, I got gray hair. Well, okay, we got a word for that. Those of you with gray hair got to suit up one more time. Those of you that are under the gray hair, you got to suit up for the first time and pay your debt for all the people that struggled before you, and the benefit, so that you would have the benefits you have today. And those that are real young, you just got to suit up. We're here because systemic racism is real, and poverty is real, and ecological devastation is real, and the ravages of a war economy, and you can't separate those issues. They are interlocking injustices that require an intersectional response. We're here because of the 2 people I met one time in a housing camp, a homeless camp, about 300 yards in the woods from a church where on the sign they proclaimed how homosexuals were going to hell. I kind of had problems with that because the God I serve says you must love your neighbor as yourself. But 300 yards down in front of that church were people living in the woods. Now, one of them was a white lady who had been middle class and had had a catastrophic illness. They left her bankrupt. And now she's living in a homeless camp with a back brace. Another was a black man who worked every day at a minimum wage job but could not afford a house. And when we went back there and saw children there, and I've been arrested 13 or 14 times in the state house, and the people in the homeless camp were more welcoming to me. They swept the dirt as though it was a floor. They offered me the bits and pieces of food that they had. And then as we were beginning to leave after having cried and heard those stories, the lady touched me and said, "Don't forget us." She said, "Because we probably won't be here when you come back because they're going to run us away. They'll come every so now and then, they clean us out." Even though they had all these trailers in the area that they could have allowed these people to stay, they said they clean us out. Don't let America forget us. And that's what this movement is all about. The work is real, y'all. You heard Liz talk about, and since 2010, long before Trump, 23 states passed racist voter suppression laws. 23 states, attacking 54% of the African American community. But did you know every state that's a voter suppression state is also a high poverty state? Not black poverty, high poverty state. Did you know every state that's a voter suppression state has bad laws when it comes to treating immigrants, treating the gay community, how they treat women, have lack of health insurance, low density of union? So there is a direct correlation between systemic racism and all of these others. And did you know that the majority of the people that get elected by racist voter suppression are white? And once they get power, the people they hurt the most are white. Because the majority of the people in this country that are poor are white. 1/3 of the 140, 1/2 almost of the 140 million people in this country that are poor are white, women and children. Do you realize that of this 140 million, as Liz said, 250,000 people die every year from poverty? 250,000 people die every year from poverty. That's 600 people a day. You heard me say today, Bob was telling me last night, that when 7 people died from vaping, you know, that's the upper class way of smoking. 7 people died from vaping. They declared it a national emergency. 600 people died from poverty, and the politicians hardly even say the word, if ever. We had 26 debates in 2016, and not one debate was on poverty. Not one, either party. Not one debate was on systemic racism. There's abundance of resources, but 3 people own as much as the bottom half of all Americans. 60 million people work for less than a living wage, but Congress, and all they want is $15 an hour. And people get locked up in this country marching for 15. I know I've been locked up 3 times just for holding a sign, 15 in the union in the wrong place. And yet Congress people make $15 a minute and get free health care from us for life, and retirement after 6 to 10 years, and yet do not want the same people who elected them, even the people that voted for them, to have the same thing. That is a moral crisis. When you get power and then you do not want the people who lent you the power to have what you have. And as far as, since this is the 400th remembrance of slavery, you know, for African Americans, it took us from zero to 400 years to get to 725. We can't wait no longer. Get to 15. We can't wait on 15. We can't wait another 400 years. We talk about housing, but did you know that the that 40% of the homeless youth population are LGBTQ young people. Yes, there are 30 million people that don't have health care. You heard Liz talk about, you heard the uninsured, but Harvard says that 2,800 people die for every 500,000 people without health care. 5,600 people die for every million. 30 million, so you do 56 times 30. That means over 150,000, nearly 200,000 people died last year, and it had nothing to do with their time had run out. It had nothing to do with God calling them home. It had everything to do with government-sponsored murder. Because anytime you have a nation, we're the only of the 25 wealthiest nations that does not offer some form of health care for all of its citizens. And not one politician that votes against health care is without health care. We talk about immigration and what is done. But you know what we have to say in this moment and why we cannot shrink? What Trump is doing is not new. So we got to get some history right. Trump is only doing what Eisenhower did in Operation Wetback in 1954. 1 million immigrants were caged up. Many of them were floated down the Mississippi River in things like slave ships. After they had used them during World War II to supplement the people who had gone to war, then folk wanted to kick them out of the country. This is vomit regurgitated. And I know that's strong language, but the Bible says only a dog returns to his vomit. That's what the Bible says. So Trump is only picking up. That's why you can't just see him. You have to see the system and the enablers, the folk in the Senate and the House and in legislatures and in governors' mansions. And then the lie that people are, first of all, you can't be an illegal alien if you're in God's creation. You aren't undocumented because you're here. We know exactly where you are. We're looking right at you. You ain't undocumented. You've been documented and stamped with God's approval in my tradition. But more so, how can you say that Latino immigrants are illegal when they are coming back to land that we stole from them? We got to tell the truth. We have to tell the truth that Abraham Lincoln stood against the Mexican-American War before he stood against slavery. That Henry David Thoreau's first act of civil disobedience was refusing to pay taxes because of a falsely started war against Mexico to take land because Mexico decided to be anti-slavery. And the Texans wanted to keep their slaves. And other folk wanted to keep the gold and oil of California and New Mexico. And you can't, how can we block immigrants of color? We didn't mind enslaving them. You can't. How are you going to say you're going to block people from Africa when Africa built this nation? Huh? And we in this campaign we have to talk, because I'm white. See, I'm not black. And I say that facetiously, but I'm going to point it out to you, man. What I'm trying to say is we need white people as well that will say these same things. See, my heritage is white, black, and Native American. When I was born, my daddy's first act of civil disobedience was fighting the hospital because they only wanted to put on my birth certificate black. My daddy said, that's not who he is. He's all of those things. I have cousins that are just as bright as any white person in here. I do. And I have Native American. Now, I'm black when the cops stop me at night. I'm very clear about that. And I come from free black people and mulattoes and white, but I understand the power of diversity because I'm it. But we have to, even in all of these discussions about immigration and road, America will never be free until she tells the truth. The truth. We have to have a movement because Native and indigenous people are still considered wards of the nation in America today. We have to have this movement because spending on federal prison has increased tenfold since 1976. We have more people in prison than China, and China has 1 billion more people, almost 2 than us in its population. Something's wrong with that, my brothers and sisters. And one person, if you ever get a chance, you ought to read the book called The Incarcerated God. And in it, there's an interview with a person that in New York, actually, and they are asked the question, why are you okay with putting more money in prisons than education? He said, that's easy. He said, in order for some of us to live like we want to live, we need ghettos to put people. But the ghettos fill up, so we need prisons. But it doesn't have to be that way. And when you talk about military, we have 800 bases around the world. 53 cents of every discretionary dollar, 53 cents is going to the war economy. People are making a killing off of killing. It's not even going to the soldiers and their sicknesses and their problems, because most combat soldiers barely make, if they even make, a living wage, $35,000 a year, while the average military president of a military contract company makes $19 million a year. And here we are. Here we are. And we're seeing, we know if we cut $350 billion from our military, we would still have more military power and money than China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia combined. And right here in New Hampshire, it's critical for New Hampshire to show up, because you're going to help us show the face of poverty is not just black and brown, which is what many people want it to be so they can marginalize it. But there are 400,000 people in New Hampshire that live in poverty and low wealth. And I would suspect most of them don't look like him. There are over 200,000 people in this state that make less than a living wage in this state, in New Hampshire. Even though we know that a $15 minimum wage increase right now would put 49 million workers at a living wage and would pump $328 billion into the economy. That's why Joseph Stiglitz said we have to stop talking about how much does it cost to fix poverty, but how much does it cost to maintain a poor nation? The Trump tax cuts, if we rolled them back, could put $886 billion. In fact, did you know that the Trump tax cuts represent more money transferred from the back of working people than was transferred from the slaves to the slave master? Did you know that? In this state. And so, my friends, in the midst of this, we know what certain people are doing. We know right now we have a president that lies all the time. We know we got enablers like McConnell. We know the same people that vote against voting rights and block fixing the Voting Rights Act against health care. We know that there are governors and legislators all over the place that would rather give money to the wealthy than to lift up the poor and the working poor. But the question now is, what must we do? Turn to your neighbor and say, that's the question. And we must declare in this moment that we will not go quietly away. We must declare that we will rise up against wrong, and not just say that it's wrong, because it's not enough to know the stats about what's wrong. We have to also have a vision to fix it. That is why we have a moral power of justice. Frederick Douglass was in a moment like this in 1852, and the Supreme Court had folk placed on it that should have never been placed on the Supreme Court, sound like today. A guy by the name of Justice Taney got put on the court that should have never been on the Supreme Court, and then he became Chief Justice, and that justice presided over the Dred Scott decision, and the Dred Scott decision said that a black man had no rights that a white man ever had to honor. And Frederick Douglass was asked after that decision, how you feel? What you gonna do? And Frederick Douglass, 2 months later, he rose to a podium somewhat like this, and he began to speak, and he said, yes, the slaveholders, they mean to cling onto their slaves as long as they can to the bitter end. He said, yes, the Supreme Court of man has ruled, but there's another court, there's a Supreme Court in heaven, and it will never side with this injustice. He said, and not only that, I meet this decision with cheer. And somebody said, cheer? He said, yes. Why cheer? Why are you okay? He said, because I know that the very attempt to blot out forever the hopes of an enslaved people just may be one necessary link in the chain of events preparatory to the downfall of the complete overthrow of the whole system. He said, if you look at history right, the whole history of the anti-slavery movement is studied with proof that all measures devised and executed with the view to allay and diminish the anti-slavery agitation has only served to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation. In essence, Douglass was saying, we know who we are. And whatever they do is only going to make us more emboldened. It's only going to intensify our resistance. Mother Jones, some of y'all know Mother Jones back in 1800. She was a bad Christian sister, but she told a group one time they wanted to pray. She said, look, it ain't praying time. She said, I believe in prayer. I know when to pray, but your institution doesn't need to be a praying institution right now. You need to be a fighting institution. She said, I'm looking for people that know how to pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living. Yeah. Cesar Chavez said, all you gotta do is get a movement started. If you can get people started and if they can believe that they don't have to give in to oppression, you cannot turn that movement around because people have decided that they will not be afraid anymore. Nelson Mandela, for 27 years in jail, got up in the morning, looked at his captors, and he decided, I'm not going to be like my captors. I'm not even going to accept that this is a jail. This is a preparatory place for me to be president of South Africa eventually. And so Frederick Douglass would get up in the morning, look at his jail, look at the problems around him, and then he would say, out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. For my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I've not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but it's unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horrors of the shade, and yet the menace of the years shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate or how charged with punishment the scroll. I'm the master of my fate and I'm the captain of my soul. Every attack on immigrants, every regressive policy, every vote against poor children and women and the sick and working people should only serve to intensify and embolden our fight back. We must know who we are. No matter what the forces of hate do, no matter what the forces of injustice do, we who are the devotees of love and justice and truth, we must rise up in this moment and intensify our fight. And if we're in the fight for justice, we never lose. The reality is either we are fighting now to sow the seeds for the victory tomorrow, or we are operating on we are the seeds that have come up for the victories today. But either way we win. And especially in New Hampshire, you all have a constitutional right to have a revolution. My God, we're looking for New Hampshire to sure enough rise up, because not only do you have the Bible, and not only do you have faith tradition, and not only do you have philosophical traditions, and not only do you have the history of battling as far back as the Revolutionary War, right in Article 10 of your own Constitution, I read your Constitution, it says government was instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, and not for the private interest or emolument of any one man. That's what your Constitution says. And not for the private interest of any one family or any one class of men. Therefore, I like therefore because that means something is coming. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted and public liberty is manifestly endangered, and all other means of redress are ineffectual. The people may, and of a right, they ought to reform the old and establish a new government. The doctrine, listen, your Constitution said, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power, oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and the happy. In other words, I heard today that they said y'all got to be good for 24 hours. Those of you did civil disobedience, okay, be good tonight, get up tomorrow, and start the revolution. And tell them that the Constitution of this state gives us a right to revolt. And let me tell you something, we've got power. Stop believing we don't have power. 100 million people didn't vote in the last election. Let's go get them. Donald Trump won in Wisconsin by 30,000 votes, but 250,000 were suppressed. 140 million poor and low-wealth people represent more people than voted in the last election. We have power. If just 2% of poor and low-wealth people are registered and vote in any state, they can change the contours of politics in that state. We have power. And since I'm in a church, I come from a tradition that says one can chase 1,000 and two can put 10,000 to flight. And if God be for us, it doesn't matter if the whole world is against us. So our theme song in this moment is a song sung by Mabel Staples to pay tribute to Nina Simone. How many of your church folk also listen to a little Nina Simone? Now it ain't Mississippi blank blank. It's not that song. But there's a song by Mabel Staples, and it says it's not the waking, it's the rising. And what it means is you got to do more than get woke. You got to get up. You can be woke and still in bed. You can be woke and still not in the street. It means there comes a time you got to do more than send a text. You got to do more than send an email. You got to be willing to wake up and get up and rise up and put your body on the line. It says it's not the waking, it's the rising. It's the grounding of a foot, uncompromising. Is there anybody in here that is uncompromising with wrong? And uncompromising with injustice, and uncompromising with mistreatment of the poor? Is there anybody here that refuses to compromise anymore? We want poor people treated right. We want the sick healed. We want the immigrants treated right. We want people paid a living wage, and we refuse to compromise anymore. Like Mother Jones, we cry power. Like Harriet Tubman, we cry power. Like Fannie Lou Hamer, we cry power. Like Rabbi Heschel, we cry power. Like Dorothy Day, we cry power. Black people are crying power. White people are crying power. Latino people are crying power. Asian people are crying power. Gay people are crying power. Straight people are crying power. Republicans are joining this movement and crying power. Democrats are joining this movement and crying power. We're going to rise up and cry power. Power, power to the people. Power to the people. There's an army rising. There's an army rising with power. An army of love, an army of truth, and an army of grace. And we need you to sign up. While you're standing, grab somebody by the hand and ask them, are you signed up? Are you signed up? Now tonight, before you leave, sign one of these forms. Before you leave, we need you to put a little money. Come on and bring those forms up here. We need you to put a little money in the basket. And listen, we don't take anything from state. When Liz and I come, we pay for everything so that the resources can stay in the state. So come on up, y'all. Come on up with the baskets. Come on up with the form. Don't leave this church. If you don't have a form, if you haven't filled out one, raise your hand. Raise your hand. If you want to join this army that's rising, raise your hand. While you'll be seated for just a second, don't go anywhere, just a second. If you haven't filled out a form, raise your hand, please. Everybody that's filled out a form, then raise your hand. All right, can't be both ways now. Let's take a seat, let's take a seat. It can't be both ways. If you haven't filled a form, please raise your hand. Just take it anyway. Maybe you'll think about it. Maybe you can give it to somebody else. If you have one in your hand, fill it out now. And before you leave, are there some baskets? Before you leave, there's some baskets out there. Please leave an offering for the New Hampshire Poor People's Campaign, please. And please, please, please get a bus from every city, a bus from every county, a bus from every church. That's all we need, just one. One. If every city in New Hampshire had a bus, if every church had a bus, and let us rise. There's an army rising. Now, are you singing tonight? Or are you gonna let that one go? Are you singing tonight? There's an army rising. Play that for me, Doc, play that. There's an army rising. There's an army rising. Do you want to be a part of it? Do you know who you are? Do you know, come here, my sister, come here in the black right there. Yes, come here. I never met you before, but I wonder why God has put us in the same space tonight. I wonder why. You got to think, come here, brother. Yeah, you. I never met you before, but for some reason, God's got us in the same space. My sister holding the camera, come here. Right behind, right there, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. I need that little young lady to come. Come here, bring her up here. Is there somebody Muslim that'll come stand? Is there somebody Latino? Is there somebody that is openly gay, openly lesbian? Come on, from New Hampshire. We need everybody. This is what it's gonna take. And we may not have known each other when we were born. We may not have been raised in the same households, but we're in the earth right now for this moment. Others have done it before us. The abolition movement changed the world. The social gospel movement changed the world. The bonus marches changed the world. The civil rights movement, and it wasn't a whole lot of people at first. It was a remnant of folk. And all over the nation, if we can get this, people who recognize I may have been born in another house, but we're in the same house now called the world. And we better know who we are. With all this craziness, we better know who we are. You cannot help a nation that has schizophrenic tendencies if you don't know who you are. All the preachers that are here, come on. All the preachers, where the preachers? Come up here. This is your movement. Your movement. It doesn't belong to Liz and me. It belongs to you. My Asian sister, come on. Yeah.
There's an army.
There's an army
rising up. There's an army rising.
I'm gonna let the leaders of the state close you out. But while they're singing, would you stand?
There's an army rising.
Grab somebody's hand and turn to them and say, we may not have been born together, but we've been born for this moment.
Break every chain. Break every chain.
We've been born for this moment.
Break every chain. Break every chain.
Come on and sing it.
Break every
There's
chain.
an army.
There's an army.
Come on.
Rising up.
God bless you, New Hampshire.
There's an army.
We're headed to Alabama and then to Kentucky. And hopefully the next time maybe we'll see you. It'll be all of us together in Washington, D.C. God bless all of you that have joined us online. Stay here for one more minute so that the leaders can turn you out.
Break every chain. Break every chain. Break every chain. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising
So as we leave this place tonight, we leave you with the words of the late Reverend William Sloane Coffin that says, may God bless you and keep you. May God make God's face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May God give you the grace not to sell yourself short. Grace to risk something big for something good. Grace to remember that the world is now too dangerous for anything but truth and too small for anything but love. So may God take your minds and think through them. May God take your lips and speak through them. And may God take your hearts and set them on fire. Through the Creator, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, it's time to rise up.